getting started, first of all, I'd like to extend a great big thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time this evening to come out to our Safety Town Hall. I also want to explain a little bit about what we're going to do this evening. My name is Shad Johnson. I'm one of the directors here in Canyon City for the school board. And tonight, our purpose of the meeting is to inform our community of our safety response efforts, prevention programs, and community partnerships. Tonight, we have school officials, we have the police chief, and our fire department are represented. Together with each of you, we hope to share with all of you that is practices that are either in place currently or that we are considering. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to come out this evening. First off, I would like to introduce the president of our school board for his opening remarks, Mr. Larry Otto.
So I just wanted to reiterate what Mr. Johnson said, and thank you all for being here and being interested in this very important topic. You know, as board members, we're a governing board. We set policy, we make budget decisions, and we rely on our district leadership staff and our partnering organizations to carry through our Safe Schools plan. So from the board's perspective, issues related to safety, school safety, are critical to the daily operation of the school district and have a significant impact on the board's efforts to focus on and improve academic achievement. The learning environment must be safe, secure, and free from disruption for teaching and learning to occur. At the same time, it is important to remember that the rights of school officials to adopt and enforce reasonable rules of student conduct are not unlimited. Certain constitutional, statutory, and regulatory laws protect students from arbitrary and unreasonable discipline. State law requires that the Board of Education to adopt and implement the Safe Schools Plan. That's Colorado Revised Statute Section 22-32-109.1. There'll be a quiz later, but you can actually find that online. As a starting point, our mission statement, the district's mission statement, makes specific mention of safety as part of its priority. It is the mission of School District Fremont RE1 is to develop compassionate, responsible, independent, and productive citizens through a quality education for students provided in a safe environment for students and staff. That's very important. Our board policy that addresses our safe school plans is policy ADD. It can be found online. I'm sure we can get you a copy of that as well. But that's how we set our policy that's directed towards safe schools. I'm going to read that. I'm going to go through it because I'm sure a lot of you have not visited that policy and don't necessarily know what our goals are and what our responsibility as a school district to provide safe schools are. The Board of Education recognizes effective learning and teaching takes place in a safe, secure, and welcoming environment, and that safe schools contribute to improved attendance, increased students' achievement, and community support. Safe schools are a priority of the district, and the district is committed to providing a safe environment in school, on school vehicles, and school-sponsored activities. To that end, the board directs the superintendent, following regular review of relevant data and consultation with School District Accountability Committee and parents, teachers, administrators, students, and when appropriate, school psychologists and members of the community, including victims advocacy organizations and local law enforcement, to develop and maintain a safe schools plan that includes. This is all that we do. And my panel members that follow me will actually speak to the specifics of what these procedures are talking about. But our plan includes procedures that address the supervision and security of school buildings and grounds, procedures that address the supervision of students during school hours and school-sponsored activities, procedures that address persons visiting school buildings and attending school-sponsored activities, training programs for staff and students in crisis prevention and management, training programs for staff and students in emergency response procedures that include practice drills, training programs for staff and students on how to recognize and respond to behavior and other information that may indicate impending violence or other safety problems. We'll talk about Safe to Tell a little bit later. Training and support for students that aims to relieve the fear, embarrassment, and peer pressure associated with reporting behavior that may indicate impending violence or other safety problems. Procedures for safe and confidential reporting of security and safety concerns at each school building, and procedures for the regular assessments by school security professionals and law enforcement officers to evaluate the security needs of each school building and to provide recommendations for improvements if necessary. Procedures for regular assessments by school climate professionals to determine whether students feel safe and to provide recommendations for improvement in school climate at each district building. Procedures to provide for regular communication between district officials, law enforcement officers, fire department officials, city and county officials, and local medical personnel to discuss crisis prevention and management strategies, including involvement by these parties in the development and revision of crisis prevention and management plans. And training programs for staff and students in safety precautions and procedures related to fire prevention, national disaster response, accident prevention, public health, traffic, bicycle and pedestrian safety, environmental hazards, civil defense, classroom and occupational safety, and special hazards associated with athletics and other extracurricular activities. And then also procedures for reporting a criminal activity to law enforcement, and a child sexual abuse and assault prevention plan, including comprehensive age-appropriate curricula regarding child sexual abuse and assault awareness, and prevention and professional development for school personnel and parents in preventing, identifying, and responding to child sexual abuse and assault. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff that we're responsible for ensuring the safety of our kids and staff in our buildings. So you will hear from the fellow panel members about the training and the procedures that we follow. We're really fortunate in this district to have strong relationships with our partnering agencies, and we also are very fortunate to have a district leadership team that takes safety very, very seriously. So with that, I'm ready to step down, and Chad will introduce Paula Boozer.
Thank you, Larry. Next up for us, Mrs. Paula Boozer is the Director of Service Supports here at the Canyon City Schools, and she's going to address some further topics for us.
Thanks, Chad. So Larry's our policy guy, so we got you all set on our policy. I want to talk a little bit, before I go into some of our specific procedures and strategies, I just want to talk a little bit about our philosophy and some of the challenges that come with school safety. So our philosophy, number one, as Larry said, safety is fundamental. It is number one. If teachers don't feel safe, they can't teach. If students don't feel safe, they can't learn. And so first and foremost is we know that as parents, you drop your children off every day and you expect them to come home every night safe. And that we know the gravity of that responsibility, and we thank you for putting that trust in us. Our philosophy is one that I like to refer to as a public health approach, which is preventative. Yes, absolutely, we need to be able to respond if an event would happen, and we have those procedures in place. But more so, we're really trying to focus on that preventive piece. So the analogy is, what public health departments do is try to prevent people from getting sick, prevent injuries. Instead of waiting for folks to go to the emergency room and be sick and have broken bones and be suffering from maybe cardiovascular issues, they want to prevent that with vaccines and well checks and those type of things. So we feel the same way here. We want to put preventive measures in place, be proactive, and you're going to hear about a lot of those this evening. I think you'll be surprised how many preventive measures we really do have in place, along with our response protocol. We look at safety as a process, it's not an event. I get calls on a regular basis. I got multiple calls today with strategies and ideas. Hey, here, this is how you keep your school safer. I listen to every one of those. As I said, it's just a process. It's not a, okay, we have our strategies in place and now we're going to move on. It's fluid, we're continually trying to enhance those. One statement that I often make when we're doing trainings, and it actually brings chills to me, but again, I think it really drives home the importance of what we do and the passion we have for keeping kids safe. And what that statement is, it says if we do it wrong, we may cost lives. If we do it right, we're expected to, and there's nothing in between. And I think that speaks volumes of the passion we have and how seriously we all take this responsibility of keeping your children safe, as well as our staff in our buildings. Challenges come along with that. One of the challenges is resources. Having the funding and the resources to do everything we would like to do. It's a challenge for every school district. We're fortunate that last November we had many of you hopefully out there voted yes on our bond issues. So we're able to take a good amount of that funding, several $1 million, and it's going to be used to enhance our physical security of our buildings. And Tammy DeWolf will be talking about that a little bit later. Another challenge is balancing the desire of freedom. Our staff and student, parents, they want freedom, they want to come and go. So balancing that desire with our need and our responsibility to keeping people safe. What do we want our schools to look like? Do we want them to have barbed wire fences? Do we want them to have metal detectors? That is something we'll be talking about this evening too. But that's a question I want you to ask yourself, is how do we balance that? It's a big challenge that we have. That desire to give people the freedom they want, keep our schools open and public, yet keep people safe. It's a challenge we talk about every day at the administrative level. So I just wanted to open with that before I cover, I'm going to take my last few minutes and cover some specific programs and procedures that we do have in place. And the first one is our response. So I don't know if many of you picked this up, but please do on your way out if you haven't. And what it's called is, it's called our standard response protocol, because it's our response. And as you'll see on here, if you can see the details, there's 5 symbols. Each of those symbols is a strategy for an event. It's how we respond to an event. An example would be a lockout. If there's a threat outside of our building, we're going to respond by going into a lockout and keeping that threat out. I could go on all day about that response, but I encourage you can go to iloveyouguys.org. It will give you more details of what that response and what those efforts look like. The key is that it's a common language and it's a common approach. Every school in our district follows the same protocol, and that is hugely important. We're keeping our kids safe. If whether a kid goes to McKinley, the high school, or the middle school, we're following the same protocol. So that is our major efforts in our response piece. I now want to move on to a little bit of our prevention. We have a district safety committee. It's comprised of about 25 members. There's community members, there's parents, there's first responders, there's law enforcement, there's representatives from every building and almost every department. We come together once a month. We discuss some of our challenges, some of our victories, what are some new strategies that we've heard, and how do we want to move forward with implementing and continuing to enhance our processes. That committee then takes that information back to the building level, and there's teams at that building level that also do some work that you'll hear about more tonight. Safe to Tell, I'm sure many of you have probably heard of Safe to Tell. It's an app, and you can also do it online. It's an anonymous way for community members, parents, staff, children to address a concern. They have a friend who they don't feel safe. They have a friend that maybe they think might be thinking about suicide. Someone made a threat. They can call in. We have a communication protocol. All those calls go to select district administration, law enforcement, and building administration, and we act very quickly. And I can guarantee you, I would standing here today, that app has saved lives in our district. I truly believe it has. So that's a great prevention effort we have. Another one is a new one. It's called Gaggle. It's not Google. It's Google with an A, and it's an internet safety monitoring system for our students who use our staff or our student email, district email, and district Google apps. It will monitor them if there's something inappropriate that comes, whether it's a picture, whether it's a statement, if it says maybe someone mentioned something about suicide or a threat, it'll highlight those. It sends it back to administration, and again, law enforcement, we act on it. So 2 big preventive measures in being able to get ahead of that curve if somebody might be thinking about doing something to themselves or to someone else. We also have various assessment tools. We use assessments to get early detection of if there might be an issue, or if something already occurred, we assess the level of concern and the level of risk and the level of threat. We do those on a regular basis. We engage external organizations. We engage law enforcement. So those things, and they help us, what those assessments do when we sit down and go through the formal process, they help us put the right responses in place and supports in place to help, whether it's a student, whether it's a staff member, that can get them what they need to make sure that they don't act on something as they shouldn't. So those are great. We have for risk, we have for suicide, we have for threats, and multiple other areas. Staff training, I think you heard that word quite a bit. We train, and then we train some more. We train at the local level, we train at the state level, we train at the regional level. We do functional exercises with our law enforcement. We train with FEMA from Fremont County, the Fremont Emergency Management Association or agency. So we train and we train and we train some more. And one main thing our people are trained is, if they hear it, they see it, or they think it, they report it. So situational awareness is huge. We can have all the technology in the world, but they say one of the best avenues to make your schools as safe as possible is have the presence of an responsible adult and situational awareness, knowing what's around. Okay, there's a white Jeep that's been driving around the middle school. I'm going to give Paula a call and have her call SRO and see if we can investigate that. Very high situational awareness in this district. And last but not least is a trauma-informed approach. This is something new. So I just really want to read really quickly what trauma is. And trauma results from an event or series of events or circumstances experienced by an individual that is physically or emotionally threatening and has lasting effects on the individual's mental, social, or emotional well-being. So this could be a death, it could be a natural disaster, it could be an expulsion. And what we're training, we have a trainer in our district, Jamie Murray, who has went to a week-long training on this. And what it really does is talks about a child's behavior may not be just because he wants to be bad or she wants to be bad or she wants to make a threat. It could be their coping mechanism to trauma that happened in their life at some point. So we're training our staff how to do positive discipline and administer positive discipline, restorative practices, and how we can get that child back on the right track, where they don't feel like their only option is revenge or doing something that could be dangerous to themselves or others. So those are just a handful of the preventive measures we have, and I'm going to pass it on to the panel to address some more of our response efforts as well as our interventions and preventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Up next, I would like to introduce Adam Hartman, who is the director of our curriculum and assessment, to cover a few more of our topics, okay?
Good evening. So, my role is Director of Instruction, and then as Mr. Johnson said, Curriculum and Assessment. I'd just like to speak to that just for a moment, because that sounds like that role is strictly about student learning. But I would tell you that we recognize in this school district that student safety comes first, and that if we're serious about whole child, whole individual care, we have to first make sure that moms and dads, as you said, Paula, are able to drop their children off at schools where kids are free from unnecessary distraction and worry. That's part of safety too. In light of recent national events, and I say recent, but obviously we're talking about decades now, it has been incumbent upon responsive educators to really learn and read about what is it that we can do to help kind of plug some of these gaps. Because it's difficult to anticipate everything, no matter how on point your folks are, no matter how much they're looking to be able to report. What is it we can do fundamentally to help our children to be in a place where they won't be prone to act out in violence themselves? It's an important question. And what Paula was talking about specifically is that public health approach to this. It's looking at the situation and then responding, but in a way that is proactive, that says, how is it that we're going to help these children to be productive, kind, caring, and so on and so forth? This isn't just me. The literature literally shows that there are 3 key areas that a school district not only can, but should hone in on. One is cultivating social and emotional health. We've been doing that in different ways for many years, but at this point, we're very serious about making sure that we're providing skills in the classroom to our kids to help them feel good about self, good about others. We talk about different measures, and I'll share with you in a moment some of the data we look at with our older students, but also are helping our classroom teachers to have conversations with kids about issues that can help us best support and understand those students. The second recommendation regarding a public health approach is to connect with community resources. We did a planning meeting for this meeting, and to look around and to see the extent to which the school district is community resource aligned is pretty impressive, and you'll see more of that. The due diligence has been done to find those community resources and partner with them. And then lastly, and this one feels a little less about the proactive side, but it's still an important responsive role, is to respond to worrisome students. Unfortunately, all school districts do have kids to come to school every day that have baggage, that have issues, that have things that we can't control, but we do need to know how to respond to. So to respond to those needs early and often. To that end, Canyon City Schools also looks at data on our students on a regular basis, whether it be anecdotal, meaning what we're seeing from kids, or on a more formal level from the information we get from the Healthy Kids Survey, Healthy Kids Colorado survey data, which we participate in every 2 years. It looks at protective factors. It's kids telling us how they feel about themselves. Do they feel like they have someone in their life they can go to when they're in a spot of bother? Do they feel safe when they're at school? Have they been engaged in a fight? Have they been bullied? Have they had moments of loneliness? Have they considered self-harm, suicide, acting out? Have they brought a weapon to school? We look at that data and it helps us make decisions around who we have to be instructionally. And as an example of that, we've parlayed the Healthy Kids Colorado survey data with a recent grant opportunity around the school health professionals. They're called SHPs, so I'll use that terminology going forward. The SHPs are positions that until 2 years ago we didn't have here. And the people who have filled those roles come from different walks of life. They're either nurses, school psychologists, social workers, or counselors. You'll notice the strand there. I didn't say teacher. I'm talking now about whole child. These folks are to be in our schools, develop relationships with kids, and provide proactive, preventative, healthy choice behavioral curriculum and learning opportunities. Secondarily, they respond when we do have trauma, when we do have events, when we do have kids that are struggling with addiction issues and otherwise. So we had Healthy Kids Colorado survey data. We coupled it with now a good number of employees that are in your kids' schools, the SHPs, and then we chose curriculum to help support that work. At present, we're looking to support the kids through what's called SEL, social emotional learning, to really help your children develop the types of resilience and understanding of self to help them to look out for their own self, report when they have concerns, deal with conflict and negativity in more healthy ways. These are some of the ways, and I would go so far as to say, that we're attempting to make an more enduring, more lasting, safe environment for kids in the district. It's easy to think about things like safe entries, it's easy to think about things like buzzer systems and so on and so forth, but a lot of the work we're doing is on the front side, not on the back side.
Thank you, Adam. Next up, we'll get to listen to Mr. George Welsh, who is the superintendent of our school district.
Thank you, Shad. Thank you so much for, weather's beautiful out there and there's a lot of other things you can be doing. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. What I want to do before going into my piece is talk about, Larry talked about the policy piece, and that's a Board of Education's job, is set the parameters by which you're supposed to operate. And it becomes my job as sort of the sole employee of the Board of Education to then make sure the system is putting that policy into action. And I have, as you've already seen through Paula and Adam, some of the most amazing director team members that I could possibly have. But going down the line here, Jeff Peterson is making sure that our buildings are safe from an operational standpoint. Sean Cole has like a 3/4 job making sure our camera systems are up and working, and the work he does on the technology end to keep kids safe is fantastic. Lynette Steinhoff's our Director of Special Services, and that means that most likely that kid that Adam's talking about who may be suffering some pretty difficult issues as a student and may lash out, that needs access to some services that Lynette can offer. And then Misty does a great job of making sure we have student-centered people who focus on the whole child, the well-being of kids, as well as making sure they can, multiply numbers and write sentences. And so this school district is blessed. And I tell you that from a standpoint of, this is my 21st year as a superintendent of schools. And the intelligence factor, the leadership factor, and the true focus on kid factor that happens in this school district is something that just doesn't happen everywhere. So you should be proud of that. Paula talked a little bit about focus on prevention, and I want to add some other things. One thing you got when you hired me here was a guy that served multiple years on the Colorado Safe Schools Resource Center advisory board. In fact, I was chair of the board at the time I got hired. I'm not sure how many years I've been on it now, maybe 10 years. And what that does, that allows me to be at a table once every 2 months where we're talking about best practices in school safety. And the greatest thing about the Colorado School Safety Resource Center is it offers free resources for us to use, to access, to put that into practice. That's where we get SRP. That's where we're able to do our evaluations of our buildings and whether they're safe enough or not, from a security standpoint and from an operations standpoint. So that's a fantastic opportunity we have. It's been around, guess what, it was established following the incident in Bailey, which was in mid-2000s, which is ultimately where the I Love You Guys Foundation was established that created the standard response protocol, because lessons learned there were, you know, there's different language for a lockout, for a lockdown, for an evacuation, for seeking shelter, and all that stuff all over the state. Couldn't we just put some common language together that we can all use? I feel like we were in a failure mode if we're going into one of those standard response protocols, because what you know, that is reactive, it's not being proactive. And that means we got something really bad going on. And by golly, we're going to practice those things on a monthly basis. But what we've got to do is make sure that we never have to use those in earnest. And so that's what the prevention's about. I want to circle back to Safe to Tell. Paula talked about that. That was established shortly after Columbine. I'm not sure if you know. And originally it was just a phone-in operation, and now with all the wonderful technology that's available, people can anonymously report to us that there's something they're concerned about. Sometimes it leads us on a wild goose chase, and quite frankly, if you wanted to go home tonight and call into Safe to Tell and make something up, we would be reacting to it before we go to bed. And it may not be true, but the idea behind it is you can anonymously report, and we take everyone seriously. I get an email, Paula gets an email, the appropriate building administrator gets an email, the police department gets an email. And as Paula says, I think kids' lives have been saved. When a kid's suicidal on a Friday night at 8, we can't wait till Monday to react. We've got to react on a Friday night at 8 if somebody has called that in. And something you should be proud of as Coloradans is this: we're the only one that established this in the country, and isn't everyone taking a look at it right now as to how good a program that is? And so it's going to be something that you're going to see all over the country. We don't sit on our hands as far as accessing resources. I can't thank you guys enough, and I know some of you may have voted against it. That's quite all right. That's our democratic process. But this community has put us in a situation where we can make the building entries much safer than they currently are. And we wouldn't be able to do that without the resources that you've offered. However, prior to the election, we were accessing resources as well. We have an Expelled and At-Risk Student Support Services grant. And what that does is that helps us intervene with the kids who are most likely, number one, to be expelled or to drop out of school, but guess who's also most likely to commit a violent act on campus? And so the work we're doing through those grants allows us to identify kids in need and offer them services prior to getting into that situation. Stacy Andrews is an all-star counselor we have at the high school, and she's led the charge on our Counselor Corps grant. I don't know if you realize this, we have extra counselors at the middle school level and the high school level right now, thanks to the Counselor Corps grant and system, and we're also applying for extra elementary counselors going forward. These are resources we would not be able to put into our schools if not for these programs. And of course, extra counselors gives us the opportunity when we're identifying a kid who's having an issue, an emotional issue, to give them some quick support. And so that's fantastic. We do have folks from outside come in and review our processes. We volunteered for a Homeland Security Services review at Canyon City High School this past year, and the feedback we got from them is, well, considering the resources you have and the situation in your building, which is going to be better thanks to the bond election, you guys are doing great stuff. If you haven't been to the high school in about 3 years, try to get in now. A little bit harder, a little bit harder. And on top of that, you usually have to, you know, if you're just off the street, they got to run your license plate. through a scan and determine if you're safe to be on campus. And there's security guards that meet you right at the front, and we're going to do things that are even better than that. We also asked this Colorado School Safety Resource Center to come in and do a quick analysis of Canyon City Middle School and Washington Elementary School prior to our application of BEST grants, because guess what we already saw in applying for those new school grants. I think it's Canyon City Middle School has something like 37 ways to get in. And most of them are sealed with hardware that's almost 100 years old and wood core doors that nobody puts on the outside of a building anymore. And that's part of why we're in this process to do significant upgrades to Canyon City Middle School. Washington Elementary has some issues as well, not as bad as the safety issues at Canyon City Middle School, but structurally, and so we're focusing on that. And the School Safety Resource Center gave us reports back that should we not get the grants, we know the work we have to do to improve those buildings. Right now in the legislature, there are several potential opportunities for state funding to come our way. One of them is extra money that was in the budget this year to be distributed this year. That's an extra $7 million that's allowing school districts to get interoperable communications. And I don't want you to hold your radio up. We have radios at many levels in the district that can talk directly to the police department, dispatch. We have multiple channels within the school district if we have an incident going on somewhere where we can communicate. And what we know during unfortunate incidents is communication saves lives. And that's a grant we won't even have to apply for because Paula did that outstanding work ahead of time and got us up to speed on that area. Another thing that's being looked at right now, and I know Representative Wilson helped push it through the House of Representatives, that's an additional $35 million to go to school safety. And that would go to things a lot like we're currently doing with increasing the safety of our entries, but it also might help us train up SROs, purchase additional security officers, things like that. It'll be a grant program that we can apply for. And we're pretty darn good at getting grants, and we see the value in bringing in those extra resources, so we'll continue to work on that stuff. Adam talked a little bit about the data, and the Healthy Kids Colorado data is of tremendous value, and I can't tell you how important it is for us to look at that. But we also look at annual trend data that we report to the Colorado Department of Education related to suspensions, expulsions, and certain incidents. Does anyone want to guess what probably the most common thing we're seeing showing up on campus right now is? Marijuana, because it's legal in society. And what I tell all the kids, well, sure, I brought a mason jar of whiskey to school when I was in 5th grade, and that was not legal. It was legal for my dad to have, but not me. And that's what we're dealing with kids right now with marijuana. And so we're tracking some issues that we have concerns about, and that allows us to place resources in those areas of concern. My ending point is this, we're not going to stop something like this happen if we work in a system in which we don't believe every child matters. And in Canyon City Schools, we believe every child matters. And that goes right down to that kid who we expel. Do we expel kids? Absolutely. Because we have to. Some of them we're held to doing by state law. They're required. However, we avoid at all costs any instance in which when we deal with a kid from that end on the discipline action where we don't keep some tie to them and the family. We offer counseling services. They can come to our Choice Points program, and so they can continue their education. And when they're ready to come back in, and we try to make that as soon as possible. When we feel they're safe and ready to come back into school, we're getting them back into the school so that they can continue their education. We don't dare let someone in who we fear would bring a danger to other students. But we understand that the best place for them to be, the way we can have contact with them is in our system some way, whether it's through our alternative to expulsion program or in a school itself. And so you should be proud of the fact that your kids go to a district, or your grandkids go to a district, or you live in a district where staff take that charge seriously, that every kid truly does matter. So thank you so much for coming out. We're going to answer a bunch of questions later. I hope I didn't put you to sleep.
Thank you, Mr. Welsh. I hope that you're hearing most of all the passion of this staff and the school district to keep our children safe at all levels. And next up for us this evening is our local chief of police, Chief Harvey, to address some other topic areas as well.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. My name is Derek Harvey. I'm the Chief of Police here in Canyon City, and I'd like to thank the panel members for having me be part of this discussion. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight to be part of our plans and this discussion to be able to ask questions. What we're really here to find out is how are we keeping our children safe? And you've heard a lot of discussion about when an event happens that we're detecting it early, that we're not waiting for something to actually occur. And I'm blessed to be part of a community and a school district that's very responsive. And the words, "it can't happen here" or "it won't happen here," have never been said here. Because once you get beyond that line of thinking, then you can say, okay, what do we need to do to actually keep our children safe here? And then some of the areas that we have concerns about are no longer taboo, or no longer unreachable. We live in what's possible and think about what's probable. And we try and strive as a district and as a community to keep our children as safe as we possibly can be. So how are we keeping our children safe? Well, it's through two means, really. Early detection, which you've heard a lot about already. The school district, I'm fortunate to be able to work with a very progressively minded school district that thinks ahead, both the social and emotional well-being of our students, but then also regular communications with the police department about what can we do to improve the school safety that we have. And so then it comes to, once we've detected something, how do we respond to it? And the police department has very open lines of communication. We have 2 currently assigned school resource officers, but we don't just stop there. We also assign each of our police officers on the street a school to adopt. And what that means is that every officer who works for the Canyon City Police Department goes and stops by a school at least once a week for at least an hour, and if nothing else, has a conversation with young people. And that has benefits for me as a police chief. Number one, it breaks down some of those barriers. It doesn't make the police look scary. And if somebody has a concern, it makes us a little bit more approachable, whether that's a staff member or a student, to say, hey, I have a concern about this, and I want to talk with you about something that's bothering me. There's no problem that's too small, and no communication that is too little for us or unimportant for us to discuss. We've had several interactions. Ms. Boozer has my cell phone number, and if she has a concern, she calls me. And that regular communication is how we do our early detection. We've heard about several of the programs already the school district has in place, and they're phenomenal. Very progressively minded, thinking about that, again, that social and emotional health of our young folks, and making sure that their needs are getting met, so that somebody who's in our school system doesn't decide to do something and result in the tragedies we've seen nationally. The other side and the responsibility I have over and above the school district is the early intervention, or I'm sorry, timely intervention. What I mean by timely intervention is when an event has actually taken place, it's my responsibility to ensure that the police officers who are responding get there quickly and are trained to do their jobs in an efficient and fast manner. There's a lot of concerns that have been brought up nationally as far as whether the police are equipped to do this or whether we should look at other places. And I want to assure you that the regular communications that I've had with the school district and how those conversations have transitioned into policy reform and emergency management plan revision are making our schools safer than I'd put us up against any school in the nation. So that timely intervention, getting back to that, our officers go through regular training, and we're going to do it again this summer, to where we do stress inoculation. And what I mean by that is that we try and create as realistic an environment as possible when something goes wrong. So should we have an individual who shows up at a school that has a gun and threatens staff members, students, or actually is taking some sort of aggressive action, as real as we can make it, that's what we try and do for our officers. So when they respond to a scene, they are not responding to an incident, they're responding to the training that they've already been through. You know, this is something that I hope never happens here. And we're planning as best we can to prevent it from happening here, but unfortunately my reality is I have to be ready to respond should it happen here. And I don't want my officers given a second thought. I want them to rush into the building, understand and believe in the training that they've been given, the equipment and support that this community and the school district has given us, and the responsibilities that I have asked each one of them to do. There's no greater sacrifice than somebody who's willing to sacrifice their own life for another. And quite honestly, officers do it across this country every day. We can't forget about that. So, but again, kind of going back to the early detection, because the timely intervention piece I've talked about is something that randomly happens around the United States. It hopefully will never happen here, and so what we really focus the majority of our time on is that early detection. And so one of the ways that we do that is by having monthly meetings with the school administrative staff to talk about security issues. We actually have done a functional exercise that worked the emergency plans of both the police department and the school district to determine what holes we had and what we needed to fix. And I'm happy to say that the result of those conversations are, and I know it's hard to believe having a pushy police chief wanting you to change things, but the school district is willing to listen. And I think that speaks volumes about the professionalism that they have and the progressive mindset that they are doing what is absolutely best to keep our kids safe. That timely intervention isn't just police officers responding to the scene, even though that's kind of what we focus on. There are other aspects, physical security measures, policies that can prevent people from wanting to come in place. And the assessment that Superintendent Wells talked about, they received excellent marks on that. So the policies that we're doing are cutting edge, and I have to re-emphasize that we are progressively minded and looking forward. It's not about what currently we're doing is meeting our need. We look nationally to say, what should we be doing better? And we take actionable steps to make that a reality here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief Harvey. Appreciate your insight very much. And I hope again that as you're listening to these different agencies talk to you and these different directors and their emphasis, that you're understanding the integration of each of those. And next up, as a continuation of that, we have the principal of Lincoln School of Science and Technology, Mrs. Tammy Wolf.
Good evening, everyone. Basically, in the trench, now we're talking about at the building level. So I'm here representing the building administrative principals, and I want to really cover about 4 topics. 1, facility and personnel. 2, drills and training. 3, future security. And 4, some reflections on my 28-year career here with Kansas City Schools. So first off, facility and personnel. We now have 1 point of entrance. That is front doors. That's it. All other doors are locked. Doors are locked. Only under supervision should those doors be open. Visitors now must check in and check out at front door locations. We have signatures for that. I know who's in the building and who's out of the building. If we evacuate the building, we take those check-in, check-out sheets, and I know I'm still responsible during this fire drill for those 6 visitors that are still in the building. Our visitors now have CBI background checks. So it is no longer the day when you can come in and join us for a Christmas party just because at the last minute. We no longer operate under those protocol anymore. Our school district employees have badges so we can identify from a distance who is school personnel so that we can rely on them in terms of an emergency and the care for our kids. We also have situational awareness. Mrs. Boozer mentioned this earlier. Within that, it's not only inside the building, but it's also outside the building on campus. So if we see a suspicious vehicle in the parking lot, that custodian uses one of our radio. He contacts me, we contact CCPD, and we get out there and figure out what's that vehicle doing here, should it be here, and if it should not be here, it's out of here. So when we talk about those kinds of things in the trench now at the building, we are more focused on serious security and safety than we ever have been in the past. We do have school silent alarms, panic buttons if you would, at several locations within every building. So those are some of the feature and personnel pieces that I wanted to share with you tonight. Second piece is drills and trainings. Monthly fire drills occur. Quarterly lockout, lockdown, hold in place drills occur. Within the last few years, every building in this school district has participated in an evacuation off-site in preparation for parent-student reunification in terms of some form of emergency on campus and we need to evacuate the building. Those things are occurring on a regular basis. every building, my building this morning had a BSERT team meeting. That is building safety evacuation response team meetings. We talk about our drills, what's going well, where do we need to improve on those drills, what are some of the communication we need to strengthen. So it is from bottom up and top down, as you are hearing tonight. In addition to that, Mr. Welch spoke with you about the communication with the radios. District-wide, we have 162 district-wide radios for effective communication. I can touch this radio, press the orange button, and everyone at the administration office can hear the conversation I am having in the front office or wherever my location is, so that they can immediately be in tune with what's happening at the building level. I press another button 4 times, I can reach these administrators and that SRO officer within seconds. We've never had that form of technology before. They're radios, but really, they're mini computers. They can do lots of communication functions. Within future security, I'm excited. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Peterson worked on lockdown buttons. So if you go into our buildings now, you see a fire alarm button that you pull, and you can also see a lockdown button, so that anyone in the building can trigger a lockdown if the situation calls for that. We're about ready to roll that protocol out, and I'm excited to have that in place as another level of security. The other thing that's coming to us in summer of 2018 is secure vestibules. In other words, more secure front doors, right? So that people cannot be getting in unless we can identify them and we know they have the right to be in here among our staff and our students. In my 28 years as an employee here with Kansas City Schools, there is without a doubt no more serious, significant safety and security emphasis that we've ever had, to be honest with you. Back in the day, we had fire drills. I remember when I was a child in Illinois, we had tornado drills, right? Did you just hear all of the drills and trainings that we do? It's a different world now, guys, and we're responding to it, but on the front end, we're also trying to be proactive with it. So, our seriousness about the focus of safety and security is at the highest level I've ever experienced in the last 28 years as an employee here. In some regard, that's a good thing. In some regard, it's rather unfortunate, isn't it? But it's the world we live in, and we take it serious because we know your precious little ones that you drop off to us in the morning. We want to make sure they're coming home to you safely at night. Mr. Cook, can we leave?
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Sure appreciate that. And finally this evening, before we get into question and answers, I'd like to introduce to you from the Canyon City Fire Department, Mr. Ron Cook.
Thank you, Chef.
You bet.
So as you can tell, almost everybody here has been talking about more school security type things. I'm going to step back a little bit. Of course, I'm with the fire department, so fire is my big thing. I'm also on the district safety committee, thanks to an invite from Paula. Work as a liaison between the school district and the fire district, which has been a great relationship for us. But I want to take just a second to talk a little bit about fire safety in the schools. As it's been mentioned, fire drills have been going on since the dawn of time. Everybody knows about fire drills. Not everybody knows how hard the school district works to make sure your kids are safe at school in regards to fire. I'd like to commend Jeff Peterson, Director of Operations. He's the one that makes sure that the sprinkler systems are tested and up to snuff, fire alarms work, kitchen hoods and suppression systems in the kitchens are all good to go, all that good stuff that makes my job and my guys' job a lot easier. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and then I was also asked to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that our safety committee has been doing at the school district. Several people already mentioned that we do many of us have attended the I Love You Guys Foundation trainings. Very beneficial, really tugs at your heart, really gets you into a desire to do your best to keep these kids safe. Chief already mentioned the functional exercise we had. That was an awesome opportunity. We had law enforcement, City and county there. We had the folks from AMR Ambulance there, had some of my crews from the fire department there, school district staff there. It was a very big, well-organized thing that really showed the commitment from the school district side as well as police and fire department, all of us working together. Another thing we do a lot is our drills. We've already talked about fire drills, but we do a lot of the lockdown drills like they've discussed. We actually have a core team of lockdown drill team. There's about 10 of us that Paula invites to each one of these lockdown drills. Those of us that are available, we go to the school, we assist them with their lockdown drills. It brings some very good consistency to make sure each school is doing it the same. It also gives a consistent message to the kids and the staff that we take these things very seriously, and we expect and don't accept anything less than 100% participation, whether it's from the schools or the staff. Allows us as a team to give feedback to the principals to let them know that, hey, this went great, this not so much. So it's a very good feedback, positive thing that we do. And from being on it for this whole school year now, it's amazing the quality of our drills have went from kids being noisy in classrooms, some staff maybe not taking it serious if they're on their planning period, to now probably 99% efficient. Kids are hid, kids are quiet, even staff on training periods are hidden down behind their desk like they're supposed to be. So it's amazing how much that has helped. And I know for one, as a parent of a student in this district, I'm very proud of the work that this committee's been doing, and I really feel comfortable sending my kid to school here with the staff that we have. And then looking ahead a little bit, we have been in discussions with the school district. I know everybody's worried after Florida and the shooting and the supposed pulling of the fire alarm to maybe lure people out into the hallway. That's weighed very heavy on all of our minds. Fire drills are still important. We will still do fire drills, but there's been pieces put in that say if staff isn't aware of a possible bad scenario or bad situation, they have our blessing. If a fire alarm goes off, they can hold students in the class. We're not going to yell at them, scream at them, whatever against them for putting the kids out in harm's way. So we've taught the kids that, we've taught the staff that if anything suspicious is going on when a fire alarm goes off, that it's okay for them to hold in place until they're contacted by administration to take further action. There are some other things out there. One of them is a positive alarm sequence. It's a nationally allowed standard. We're going to look at maybe implementing it. When the fire alarm goes off, it gives staff a very set of time parameters that they have to take certain actions. If they do that properly, it will delay the fire alarm from going off for up to a couple minutes, which allows them time to get out, check the hallway, see if there's truly smoke or a fire, or if there's somebody there with bad intent. So I think that's going to be a very big safety aspect that's going to come up hopefully by next year that we're going to be able to talk about there. So in closing, thank you guys for coming here. Appreciate everybody being here tonight, and appreciate the school district doing this for all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. We're going to switch gears now just a little bit because this evening is also about question and answers. And in preparation for that, we didn't know exactly how many questions we would get from the public, and we did get a few, but we also went ahead and prepared some questions and some answers that would allow us to go ahead and expand on what they've already shared, but a little bit more on the details of that. Larry, would you read that? Hand me that. Read that first. Our first question this evening for our board is, what measures are being taken to secure areas around the schools? And Paul, I'll direct that to you and to Chief Hart.
Well, I think we talked about some of those earlier. A lot of it is situational awareness is again, a big piece. We don't have the resources to necessarily fence in every school, so no one can have access. So we've trained our staff on situational awareness. We have external cameras. I believe we have 115 cameras in our district, Sean. So we have people monitoring those on a regular basis. They can see if someone comes to the door, be proactive in that way. Tammy talked about the secure vestibules that will be coming soon. We've enhanced, I think where Chief Harvey will come in, is talk about some of the enhanced patrol around some maybe areas of concern around certain schools. So I'll let him kind of talk about that piece and what the officers are doing to help us with that.
So I mentioned earlier, we have a program called the Adopt a School program. We currently have 2 SROs, and they share responsibilities throughout the district of being at schools at different times throughout the day. We do have one that's solely focused on the high school itself. But the officers, the patrol officers who answer 911 calls and respond on a daily basis, that are here at all hours of the night, if there is an issue, they are going to be the first ones responding. So our goal is really to lower that time frame of responding to a school. And so because we only have 2 SROs for a number of different schools in the district, our patrol officers actually go through our district and are assigned a specific school that it's not scheduled. There's not a certain time that they're there. They show up sometimes unannounced to just be present at school. And that presence sometimes can deter incidents, but it also, again, helps break down some of those barriers so that we're having regular communications, that if there is a concern somebody hasn't talked about, we've got somebody who's normally assigned a patrol function that's going to that specific school. Along with that, some of those conversations have been around, well, we've got a problem in this area, or maybe in this park, or this house that's happening nearby a school, not necessarily directly associated, but close enough that it's a cause for concern for the school district. And so when we hear those conversations at our monthly meetings, or even in between, we develop plans, like we did for Red Park, to identify potential delinquency issues, to identify folks who might not necessarily should be having regular interactions with young folks that might be having the interactions. And so we develop those operational plans to address those safety issues, even if they are on the periphery outside of the actual school zone.
Thank you, Chief Harvey. The next question is, would it be beneficial for emergency responders to address a person of concern outside a school building? That's for Paula and for Tammy.
Well, I've had 2 of those situations this year, so the answer is yes, we already do that. If we see suspicious activity outside the building near campus area, we immediately call CCPD, and we have them respond and check it out. In addition to that, like I said, the radio communication has been very effective on our campus, although we're one of the smaller buildings. This might be a little funny one for you. A parent arrived about 40 minutes early from end of the day pickup. Big black Suburban, huge, right across the street. We didn't recognize it. We got our binoculars out to see who it is. It's a parent. Miss Kirby, what are you doing here? It's 40 minutes too soon. Well, I thought I would be, and she lives in Penrose. I thought I would just come instead of traveling all the way back home. So we're watching a movie in the back seat. I said, next time you come in and you sign in and let me know you're here. CCPD's on its way to check you out. So, okay. So, and we log all of that information. So.
And safe to tell is a big piece of that too. We've had some situations around schools where there might be an individual that looks a little suspicious on a regular basis, walking in the area of the school or around the block, and we'll get a safe to tell report from parents saying, hey, this school, we're kind of concerned about this person, and I'll tell you, it's just one quick radio call to Officer Canada or one of our other SRO, and they're Johnny on the spot on checking out that situation. So people, our staff they're highly engaged, and they'll text me, they'll call me, say, Paula, this something just doesn't look right. If I can't get a hold of an SRO, I call 911 Chief Harvey, and I do have his cell phone. So they are highly engaged in making sure that we do keep an eye on things that are going on around our schools.
Great. The next question this evening is 2 parts.
Chad,
Yes, sir.
I just want to add one
Yes,
thing
sir.
to that.
Sorry.
And as diligent as we are, both as school staff and the police department, we can't be everywhere, we can't see everything. And just like in the campaign, see something, say something, if you as a parent or if you as a community member see something, you should say something. I would rather my folks come out there and address an issue like Mr. Wolf talked about, rather than somebody saw something and we don't get a notification and don't respond out there. So I would encourage the community to be part of that action.
Yes. And one thing I would add to that, in our community, one of the benefits of the size of our town allows us to have our first responders and our men in blue actually, and women actually close by. I can't, nobody can guarantee that at all times, but response times to those locations immensely shortened by the size of our community and the care and the heart of our police department. As I said, the third question came to us in two parts. The first part is, does it make sense to have a perimeter security for the school in hopes to prevent someone from making it into the school building? Second part of that is, if mass shootings are to be considered the new normal, is it possible to have a checkpoint security similar to stadiums or government facilities? I'm going to direct that to Superintendent Welsh and Chief Harvey.
Yeah, and I'll stand so you can see me speak. Paul indicated information about this before, and the really comes down to our tolerance. You know, there are schools in the country that getting into the school looks like getting off an airplane. You know, and if ultimately the rise from the community is this is what we want in our schools, well, I think we'd have to consider that. We'd have to seek the resources to do that. We currently don't seem to have that desire from the community. I think we want to strike the balance between being welcoming at school while also trying to be pretty selective about who we let in. And so the real answer to that is, what is the community's desire? And so far we have no indication that the community's desire is it's as hard to get into Canyon City High School as it is to get into the Capitol up in Denver. If ever that case were made, we would consider that. But in the meantime, we're doing the best we can to have single points of entry, to stay diligent about who's around our facilities, and to check the backgrounds of folks who walk into the building. So, Derek, anything you want to answer or add?
Just so you know, I actually am standing. I'm just
tea for you.
Yeah, exactly. So I would echo kind of what George is talking about there. You know, when you look at a free democratic society, we don't look at a policeman on every corner, a security guard at every entrance. That's not what we think of when we think of free democracy. But when you think of free democracy, you think of a community that's strong enough and hard enough as a target that terrorists don't want to come and do these types of things, or somebody who has ill will don't want to come do these types of things because the community is ready. And when you think of, you know, going towards the other end of the extreme, that foreign powers or even domestically grown terrorist organizations that want to disrupt our way of life, what do? They make us think second thoughts about, should I go to a mall, or should I go to a movie theater, or should I do these types of things? And in response to that, I say that yes, you should, and we shouldn't change our way of life because somebody might come and try and disrupt that. What we need to do is be more ready.
Thank you. Next question is, I noticed that we do not have a uniform approach to visitor management at all schools. What is the plan for this? Direct this to Ms. Boozer.
I'll start with what the plan is, and Adam's going to kind of chime in as to kind of why you don't see a uniform approach right now. But we know there's a gap there. We've identified that. One of the reasons why we went to the voters in November was to enhance some of our security measures. So come next fall, and I think I'm right on this, Jeff. I mean, he's shaking his head yes. Every one of our schools, with the exception of Washington, who does have a single point of access and a locked door, as well as CCMS, because those, as you know, are up for replacement. But every other school will have a secure vestibule, keyless entry. It'll be a system where you know, the person will have to come up to the vestibule, show us their ID. They'll be ran through a electronic system similar to what the high school in Harrison currently have. We implemented those there to make sure it was the system we wanted to roll out district-wide. So that's the plan to close that gap, is next year you will see that consistency in every school in our district, with the exception of the two that we're looking to replace.
the point that I might like to add about this, when we were discussing this in advance, I have a key that gets me into every one of the buildings, so as a director, you're out and about in the district on an everyday basis, and you go to one school and the door is locked, you go to the next one and the door wasn't locked. And it started to beg the question around, if there's a best practice here, why is it that we're not doing the same thing in all of them? And there is a good answer for that. The determinations have been made based upon the distance from the door that staff is actually located, and also the line of sight visibility for those folks. So I just thought it might be something that community members might want to consider, because some of you may have children in more than one school, that it actually is a decision that's been made by building basis. Good news is soon we'll have a consistent universal approach to all the buildings.
Great, thank you. The next question is, are there any considerations being made to arm non-first responders to enhance protection for students and staff in the event of an active threat? Superintendent Welsh?
Yeah, you know, this is probably the question everyone was wondering whether it was going to get asked or not. I'd be happy to share my opinion with you. I live in Canyon City, Colorado, and I feel like probably at any moment, wherever I am in this town, I'm no more than a minute away from a police officer, a first responder. We also have a wonderful sheriff's department who, quite frankly, shares the SRO load with us over at McKinley. And then we also have like a slew of people in uniforms carrying weapons who happen to be parents as well. And what we do post at all our entries is it's our desire that only folks who bring weapons onto campus are the ones who in the course of their regular work are required to do so. If I lived in Dove Creek, Colorado, where it might be a half hour from a first responder, should something happen bad on campus, I'd be 100% for arming some staff members, because if I had to deal with a scary issue for a half hour before the first responders came, I would want to make sure that we had clear procedures in place, folks who are ready to respond to that to the best of their ability at that time. And so once again, this is sort of a matter of a community desire. One of the news reporters who I was interviewed by before the session said, well, what are you feeling like the staff's opinion is? And unless someone wants to share something different with me, is I haven't heard a single staff member say, hey, arm me, I'm ready, you know. And I would like to hear our chief of police's opinion about this, because, you know, I'm not the one that would have to respond to an active shooter in a building and kind of have to make the decision, is this a good guy or a bad guy? I'd sure like to know what common practice is on police force.
So when you think about armed response, and you think about incidents that have happened around the nation with somebody with a gun, when the police show up, we are looking for a person with a gun. And if there are already shots that have been fired in that situation, our responsibility is to neutralize that threat. And in a lot of situations where a person is pointing a gun at other people, whether they believe that person to be a bad guy or not, we don't all the time know that. So there's some logistical pieces there, and I've actually known officers who were plain clothes in undercover assignments who tried to address an armed individual at a sporting event, and that officer was shot by responding officers. So there are definitely some logistical concerns with arming citizens. Now I agree, if we were in a more remote area, it might make more sense, but here it just really doesn't for the type of environment that we have. And it's not current law. It's currently against Colorado law for someone to possess a firearm other than law enforcement on school grounds.
And I think that probably covers the question as to why we don't currently allow people with concealed carry permits to carry their weapons in the school. So if that was your question, I hope that suffices there. The next question is, when you expel a student that is considered a high safety threat to the school, how is he or she monitored during expulsion?
So I can start with that. I'll start with some of the systems that we have in place within our student database. So we, other than the physical security barriers of them getting into the school, they'd have to go through those secure entrances or through the front door, where those people that are manning those facilities know who the expelled students are. Secondly, we have systems in Infinite Campus that will alert staff or limit the communication. So for example, if we have an expelled student, that student will be, they won't get the communications about, hey, we're having a parent night tonight, or we're having an assembly tomorrow. So they're not in the communication loop of what's going on within the district, at least not in a formal way, they aren't. We also have flags in our system, so if a student has been expelled, they'll be flagged within our student database, so every staff member will know that, oh, he has a flag, he's been expelled, he's not allowed on campus. So those are some of the internal pieces that we do, as well as in every school. Obviously, the high school probably has even more building level processes put in place, because the majority of kids that go through expulsion come from the high school level. So they're very active in just at the building level, putting things in place that will alert their staff. And then there's also that need to know basis. So if there's someone that truly needs to know at that front door that this child's been expelled, they're going to know. And then the other piece is that physical security, that we engage with law enforcement on how they monitor this student outside of, because at this point they're expelled, they're outside of our jurisdiction within the school building. So all we can put in place is how do we keep them out of the school building, and how do we identify that child has been expelled. So those are some of the systems we have in place. The other piece really kind of falls in law enforcement's hands.
Let me add to it first. So I indicated when I spoke before that we don't like to cut ties with a student if at all possible. If a kid, and literally we had a dangerous weapon on campus earlier this year. That person was assigned to our Choice Points Alternative to Expulsion program with constant communication with the family regarding counseling that person is getting. And so if we can keep a tentacle on them and know what's going on with them, we can then inform law enforcement if there's any concerns to be had. If you think about the Parkland shooting, that was a situation where a kid was expelled from school, and school had cut ties with them, and so they didn't know what the kid was doing in various ways. I mean, do we have a give-up point where there's a point at which we won't continue a kid's education because they've been too much trouble? Yeah, we have that, but when we get to that, we're trying to get them placed in like a 24-hour facility, some heavy counseling, things like that, and then we would definitely be in communication with the police department. So what I want to tell you is we don't kick our kids to the curb and ignore them. If we're in a situation like this, we continue to provide them services. And our goal is to get them back in school so they can earn a diploma and they can start contributing to society. Now, in terms of when we're all scared about someone, how does that work on your guys' end? What are the legal restraints that you guys have?
So the first determination is really whether it's appropriate for law enforcement to intervene. And really the question boils down to, is this person a safety risk, either harming another person or themselves? That's when we would get involved. In typical expulsions, it may be appropriate, it may not. And that's really a decision based on the school's information that they have and whether or not there is that threat piece potentially that person might pose. And should an individual who is expelled comes back on school grounds after they've been told not to return, that's an example of where we would show up and start asking additional questions as to why are you here, and delving into that piece a lot more. So I think on ours, it's really more of the threat assessment from a violence towards themselves or others.
Okay, thank you. Our next question comes from the audience tonight, and the question is, why are there no gates on the playground at Washington Elementary?
I was asked that one by like a Fox News reporter too. And in one way, a little bit of admission is I'm not sure. That's just the way it's always been. Sorry to admit that. In another sense, though, is one way kids move around the Washington campus is if you've been in the hallways, you can exit out a classroom door to go out to the playground and such. And I think at some level the question was asked from the standpoint of, are our kids safe out on campus? And what I would assure you is this, is anytime we have kids out on some kind of a recess, we have adults in the area watching them. A fence wouldn't necessarily stop a kid from being accosted or snatched. However, would we like to have a situation where we had a complete perimeter like that? Absolutely. But we have the same issue, I know at Mountain View with Core Knowledge, we have the same issue at Lincoln. You can get into the playground areas. And so those are things I think we've got to look at going forward. And certainly building a new Washington Elementary School will make that situation slam dunk if we get the opportunity to do that. And so my answer to you is we're going to take a look at that and see what would be best practice, but also with the understanding that we do want staff and kids to have access to the facilities they need as they're currently designed to get to things. And with the understanding that we have adults out, when kids are out, there's adults out supervising, and that's part of that being diligent.
Yes, sir.
One other thing to add to that from the fire department perspective is worst case scenario when that building is on fire, we want those kids to be able to get a safe distance away. Some of the older schools were built with fences too close really for comfort if there was a major incident going on. So we like those kids to be able to get further away. It allows our people to do their job, plus allows us, you know, to get those kids out of harm's way. If you look at most of the modern schools, most of them don't have fences, so part of that is probably for our point.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next question from the audience this evening is, when planning for building 2 new buildings in the district, what will be in the plans to address student and staff safety?
So I can start just with our selection process. So we had 3 companies that put in bids to basically, I don't have all the language, but to do our build design for our new facilities. And there was a committee of like 9 or 10 of us, I think, that sat in that room. And every one of us, at the end of the day, chose, one of the reasons we chose, there were many criteria as to, you know, why we might choose someone, why we might not. Price was one, their ability to do the work. One of the main criteria was the person that the company that we picked had a focus on safety and how they would build our schools with safety in mind. Part of that's through environmental design. So there's certain, you know, where you place certain trees, where you place certain fences, how your kids navigate through the grounds of the school, and how they may be a little bit more out of sight based on landscaping. So I can speak to that piece, that of the 3 companies, they all were good, they all had the ability to do the job, but the company we chose made safety a priority on how they're going to design our schools. And they went through many different aspects of that, and I couldn't sit here and tell you all those tonight, but that is on the forefront, and that's something that Jeff's having conversations with them daily, is whether it's the vestibules, whether it's landscaping, whether it's how we design an auditorium with safety in mind. That was absolutely a priority when we chose the company that was going to do this work for us, if we're fortunate enough to have the grant awarded to move forward. So that's my piece on it.
And not only did we intone that when we went through the design build selection process, but also then when we met, you might recall, with the selected combo, they asked us, how will you know that, or how will we know that our job has been done well? And we had to then generate, I believe, the number.
Conditions of satisfaction.
Conditions of
Number
satisfaction.
1 was safe schools.
Yep.
And finally this evening, our last question from the audience is, I believe it's NFPA code, new, I believe, IBC building code, and common standard for building access. Now, I think we've addressed that last one, I hope. I'm not certain if anybody has...
I'm not...
Oh, I think Ron does too.
Yeah?
Either way.
No, go right ahead.
All right, so one of the things I spoke of earlier with that, I gotta get the terminology right, positive alarm sequence, that comes out of the NFPA catalog. I got a little copy of the handout here that talks about that. So I believe that's what they might be referring to, how NFPA ties into the fire alarms, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. I'm not sure if that's where that question was going, but that's the NFPA tie-in part. The IBC is the International Building Code. That ties in directly with the International Fire Code that we use. That is the one that talks about egress doors must be so wide. They must have the right kind of hardware, the panic hardware going out, certain kind of doorknobs, all that kind of stuff So our new buildings will be built to all the newest, latest, greatest standards as far as all that stuff goes. So I don't know if that totally,
Yeah, but I do want to add to that, because the elephant in the room on that is we've got some older buildings, and when we build the new buildings, we still have some older buildings. And, having built a new building in San Luis Valley, you go through state engineer, and every code that just was talked about being required to be met must be met. I was amazed going from an older school to a new school, just how many toilets had to be put in our new school. I mean, literally, that's determined by code, and then when you think about the poor custodians have to clean everyone every day, what does that look like? You almost have to hire extra people. But what's a fact about this is if you have a building, Lincoln, built in 1950, it's not up to those codes. We are trying to make it safer with the more secure entry. We put the panic buttons in. We're doing that. We don't have a sprinkler system in Lincoln, as would be modern code if you built a new building. And you don't have to do those things on buildings that are already in use. And that's part of how you get into that whole balance. Is it time for a new building, or is it time for a major remodel? The current plan for Canyon City Middle School is actually a major remodel, including keeping that 1925 section. But by doing that, we'll be required to bring everything up to all these codes. And so the newest buildings, and very likely Harrison to a great extent, not completely, because some things have changed since 2006, those things are most up to code. But there's sections of Canyon City High School, no way, not right now, without doing a major remodel or fixing those things. But here's what I want, here's the sales pitch for me and my retirement, when I'm just sitting my butt up there at 15 Tanner Parkway and Dawson Ranch and laughing at all you guys trying to keep this thing going. We've thought about what the future of facilities might look like in Canyon City Schools, starting with Washington and CCMS and bringing entries up to a safer state. You know, we're done paying for Harrison in about 2024. And so our taxes will go down because of that. And the question, I won't be superintendent of schools by then, I guarantee that, okay? But the question we all need to ask ourselves is, at that time when our taxes are about to go down because that facility is paid off, might it be time to invest in Lincoln, McKinley, or whatever some other things are at that point? And what's a fantastic deal is through the BEST program, you know, a community like Canyon City can build those schools at 30% thereabouts of the cost. And so those are things to start thinking about long term. We don't have the resources to do those things right now. We're doing the best we can with what we have to make them safe. And once again, some of these things won't make the difference if we're not diligent, if we're not focusing on the needs of every kid and things like that. And before, if you don't mind this, before I turn it back over to Shaq, because I know that's the last question, I want you to look at Lloyd, who's about to pass out back here, and I heard about his new nickname that I'll be using heavily through the processing. And Larry, it's after 8 p.m. These guys were in this room this morning meeting in negotiations with teachers this morning. They have continuously worked for the school district, though Larry's trying to run some kind of business, and so is Lloyd. I want you to know the dedication you have on this Board of Education for things like safety, for things like making sound educational decisions for our kids. And anyone who put in a 12-hour day on a Monday, capped off with this, has to have some appreciation. So thank you guys for the hard. I get paid for it. I got as long a day as they've got, but I get a lot better paycheck than they do. So thank you guys.
Thanks, George. Before I close things out this evening, board, panel, any parting thoughts that any of you might have?
Everyone might want to thank the mayor and city councilman Hamrick for showing up and being interested in the safety of our schools.
I don't even think they heard you.
No, I was whispering in your ear.
Yes, Mayor and Councilman, we are so grateful that you are here with us tonight. And I have to share with you, it's not just tonight. If you haven't been a part of our meetings before, I will share with you that quite often council people and the mayor are present. Again, because the value and the importance of our school and its system in this community, more importantly, those kids, is also of great value to them. So thank you very much for being here. Any other parting comments?
My only parting comment is again, thanks for those of you that come out. I know it's hard to you get home from work and you get settled in. It can be very difficult to come back out. But we appreciate you being here. And if I can ask one thing is help us spread the word. I get calls every day about what we're doing for safety and security. That's kind of how this meeting was born. I was talking to parents and telling them the things we were doing. They're like, wow, I didn't realize you had so many strategies in place. This makes me feel much better. So we came together as a group and said, we need to inform our community. We would love to have 100 people here tonight. But you know, if one person, each of you tell 10 people, before we know it, we've got 1,000 people covered. So help spread the word, encourage them to ask questions, encourage them to stop in the building, give us a call. We'll be very transparent, and also continue to be diligent out there, as he said. If you hear it, what is it?
See something,
See something, say something. And encourage your kids to do the same thing, because that gives us 3,600 sets of eyes every day to help keep our schools safe. So thanks again.
And finally, folks, if you would please just take a moment and give this incredible panel of folks a round of applause.
I want to make one observation that I think goes worth noting too. We did have representation in the crowd this evening from some of the buildings too. So the same way that everyone else that has been mentioned has had some long days, so has some of the building leadership. So thank you to the high school, thank you to Harrison School, Tammy, thank you to Lincoln School. There's a lot to be said for clear communication that goes in all directions. So thank you.
And literally from the bottom of all of our hearts, we couldn't be more grateful for your time this evening. The student safety in our district is of paramount importance, and frankly, we hope we never hear about another school incident, but I tell you what, every time we do, our thoughts and prayers go out to those folks, and I know as a community that's how you feel too. So we're grateful again for your attendance here tonight, so thankful that you came out, and we hope you all have a great evening. Thank you again for coming out.